Welcome to Grow Them Right, podcast where we discuss how to prevent health issues from infancy. I'm Dr. Roche, a dentist and a mother of two. As a dentist, my expertise are in oral health, and I'm committed to continuing education. I also have a keen interest in preventative health. So in this podcast, I ask questions of experts, explore their insights, and discuss practical tips on how we can help our children grow healthy and strong right from the start. The whole idea for this podcast is to elevate the conversation and allow you, the listener, to make more informed decisions. I need to emphasize that these podcasts are not a substitute for medical advice. If you have any specific health concerns for you or your loved ones, please speak to your own medical professionals. I hope you find this space useful, and if you do, please take a second to subscribe and share with your friends. And together, let's grow them right. How do we know we're sick if we've never been well? We all know that what we feed our children impacts their health, development, and even their behavior. So how are we to feed the kids well when we are ourselves so busy and overwhelmed? To discuss this today, I have Mrs. Bronwyn Pollnitz here. Bronwyn is a primary school teacher with many years of experience, and she started learning about food and specifically food additives when she first became aware of their impact through her own experience as a mother. As always, please take this as board information resource rather than medical or nutrition advice, and speak to your own medical practitioners if you have any concerns. So, Bronwyn, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Roche.
So, tell me first, what prompted your interest in food and learning about food additives?
Well, it was kind of an accident. It wasn't planned at all. And it really came about when our children were little. Our oldest ended up being itchy and grumpy and asthma-y. And once we'd ruled out some of the allergies of milk and eggs, we thought there's something else going on. And we were directed towards the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital's elimination diet. And we looked at the list of additives and started cutting things out, and completely changed for him.
Amazing.
Yeah, interestingly, for our second child, I went to a talk by Sudan Gate, and I thought, I know all this already. And she talked about how food additives can travel through your breast milk and affect your baby.
Wow.
And I thought, that is interesting, because she was such a fidget pot. She couldn't lie still even when she was feeding.
Your second one?
My second one. Yes. And I looked at the list again and made a few more changes. I thought, I've missed something, and I actually found a yellow colour tartrazine in the yogurt I was eating. Took that out, and I had a girl who could lie still in my arms.
Wow.
So yes, it just made such a difference.
So you eliminated something out of your diet to benefit the infant.
And it had never occurred to me that it could be affecting her.
Okay.
Yes, and then when our third child came along, I remember when he was about 3 weeks old, the older two, who were 3 and nearly 5 at the time, they had some days where they were just off. They would go out of their way to annoy each other, and they would be completely overreacting. And I remember thinking, it sounds awful, but I remember thinking, we have made the biggest mistake having a third child, because I can't cope. And then I thought, this is strange. It seems like it's the day after we have some fast food fries, but that doesn't make sense, because I've checked the ingredients. I'm sure they're fine. And then, of course, the penny dropped, and I thought, let me check if the ingredients have changed. And they had, and we cut out those. It was a synthetic antioxidant. We cut out the fries, and the kids were playing beautifully again.
Amazing.
So for us, it was a surprise, but it made such a big difference.
So as I said in the intro, this comes from your own experience as a mother, and you were proactive enough to actually go and learn about it and be disciplined enough to do something about it. So in general terms, what impact do these food additives have on children?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because they can affect different kids in different ways, and it can be their health, it can be their behaviour, it can be their learning. So you might be thinking things like headaches, stomach aches, itchy skin. It could be sleep disturbances. So it could be kids who take a long time to fall asleep or wake up overnight, bad dreams, night terrors, things like that, sleepwalking even. And if you think of some of the behaviour things, it could be impulsiveness. irritability, sort of that obnoxious.
Kind of what we now a lot of times say, maybe ADHD, or, hard for them to sit down and listen to the teacher.
The restlessness or lack of concentration, forgetfulness. So it can have a huge impact on kids. And I think the exciting thing is removing them from kids' diets can have such a profound change.
So you mentioned that you went to Prince Alfred Hospital's resource center or website to learn about this. So where does most of this learning come from? Where was the research done?
Well, interestingly, it was actually Dr. Ben Feingold in America who was first exploring this with children. And then the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital picked up on it. And really, in Australia, we're now leading the way, which is really exciting. So they're fantastic at doing the research and helping families. And then I guess what's bridged the gap is the work of Sue Dengate and her husband, Dr. Howard Dengate. And they run the Food Intolerance Network and do talks and support lots of families. It's a volunteer organisation, and I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work with them, being a contact person. So if families needed support, I could point them in the right direction in terms of on the website, or encouraging them to go and see a dietitian if they needed to do that as well.
And it's called Food Intolerance Network.
That's correct.
And they have a website, etc.
Yes, it's a website, and it's all free on the website, available for people. It has over 20,000 members and makes a huge difference.
And of course, they probably have some links to the science behind all of this as well on their website.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they're very particular about that. And they, of course, want to look at the independent research because, as I'm sure you know, if it's industry-funded research,
of course,
you can get different results.
Yes.
So, they're very, very thorough with doing that, and all the references are on the website as well, which is great too.
So it looks like this is really, really important information that, everyone should know about. Do the school community or the health community know about this? For example, what have schools done about this? I mean, you have been teacher for many years, and this is how I know you because, of course, for the benefit of the audience, my kids went to the school that you were teaching, and this is where I learned that you were interested in this topic.
Yes.
In general, how have the schools implemented this knowledge into their curriculum or their protocols?
Well, I guess you can go back to the 80s first of all, and it was, I guess, one of the first ones where they could see a big difference. So what happened was it was New York City schools, so we're talking 1 million kids, over 700 schools. And what happened over about 4 years is that they took out the additives from the school lunches. And what they found was that the children went from 11% below average to 5% above average. So that sounds great. And then when they looked closer, what they actually noticed was that it wasn't that all the kids had made the improvements. It was the bottom kids, the ones who were struggling, the ones who were 2 or more years below where they're expected to be. And that was about 12.5% of children.
Wow.
And over that 4 years, that went to just under 5% of children. So
Incredible.
That's 75,000 kids who have had a huge change for them. That's amazing. And definitely in Australia, there have been quite a few school trials. So what happens is that the children cut out and the families cut out the food additives for 2 weeks. They get the support of what additives to cut out and how to read the labels. And then 2 weeks later, the people come back and have a conversation with the kids, and there's always really big improvements. The kids are sleeping better and getting on better with their friends. Teachers comment that their handwriting is better. I was actually fortunate enough to be involved in a trial a number of years ago.
Yes.
That was televised. And it was really exciting talking with the kids. They were really motivated to make changes. And interesting, when I first talked with them, I was saying, do you maybe have stomach aches or headaches and things like that? When I got to the question about sleep, do you wake up overnight? Do you take a while to get to sleep and so forth? we just couldn't believe it. We looked at each other, teachers and I looked at each other, because probably 3/4 of their hands went up, and those kids couldn't wait to start the trial because they wanted to see improvements.
Wow. I know that is the sleep issue specifically is a big issue. And of course, the prescription of melatonin has risen in the recent years to help children with that. And, of course, people can speak to their doctor if they have a concern about this, but, melatonin is a hormone, and what happens to the body if we are, given that hormone, are we still producing it or not? So it's very interesting to have a look at what we're eating as a way to see if that can help as well.
Absolutely, yes, because I think sometimes we're dealing with the symptoms, when we can go back to what's actually potentially causing the problems and realise that it's sometimes quite easy to solve.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So this is very useful information, but, parents are overwhelmed. We all dread making those lunch boxes. I remember when my kids were little, we don't have time. What are some of the challenges that people might have when they are trying to avoid food additives?
No, that's a great question. And I think sometimes parents don't even realise that their kids are actually affected by the food additives. I think sometimes we assume that because products are on the shelf, that they've been tested on children and that they're fine. And they've never been tested on children to see how it affects them. A really interesting thing is that the reactions can be delayed, and research has shown that if we have a reaction to food within, say, 20 to 30 minutes of eating it, we associate it. We think, oh gosh, I had the dried apricots with the sulfites and now I'm having trouble breathing, so it might be that's causing it. But what the research shows is that the reactions can start even up to 2 days later, and you are not going to make that connection. You're not going to think, my children had those crazy bright yellow flavoured snacks on Friday night, Sunday afternoon, they're fine until I get asked to do something they don't want, and then they lose it. You just don't make that connection. So that can be really tricky.
So that's a big challenge when you don't see an immediate effect to the food that the child has eaten.
Absolutely. Wow. And it can be dose dependent. So you might, for example, have a little packet of snacks maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and you don't react because you're within your threshold. Whereas one day you might have 2 packets of those snacks and you react, but you think, well, no, I don't react to that because I haven't in the past. So that can be a little bit tricky as well.
Wow.
Yes, and I know it makes it really
so
hard.
Fascinating.
Makes it really hard for parents.
I'm just thinking as you're talking, and I'm like, wow, I really need to be a lot more careful with my own diet.
It's so good when you're learning, isn't it?
Yes,
it's so
absolutely.
Good. And it can be quite tricky because even if you have a list of the additives in front of you, you might still get tricked a little bit by some of the packaging.
Yes.
So, for example, it might say on the front of the packet of maybe yogurt, no artificial colours, but if you turn the pack over, it can say 160B, a natto, which is a natural colour, and it can affect people really badly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know. If I have a natto, I wake up overnight and I'm awake for a while. And that's annoying. So I choose not to eat it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It impacts life so profoundly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another tricky one is a preservative, which is in bread and baked products. It's 282. And now that people know that 282 can be a problem, they want to avoid it. So it sometimes is called by its official name, which is calcium propionate. And that sounds quite healthy in that, you'd be thinking, calcium, fantastic.
Wow.
And so then that was called cultured dextrose, so it was hidden. And then people got to know that was actually 282. And so then it was called cultured wheat flour. So the names can change. And I actually had a look at a packet just the other day in a shop because I thought, I wonder what's happening now in that space. And on the front it said, no artificial preservatives, because it's actually a natural preservative. And I turned it over and there it was, back to 282 on the back. So misleading. So it makes it quite tricky.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking what is the simplest thing? Because, yes, we can talk about websites that people can go and learn about these numbers. a lot of these things I'm hearing for the first time, right? But what I learned when the kids were little was to really avoid the middle aisles of the supermarket where those packaged foods are. So, if it's not coming in a box that you have to read the label, then you're okay. If you're getting the spinach and the apple and the, kale, and on the other side, you're getting your eggs and your chicken breast fillets, etc., then is that fair to say that is the safest way?
I think that's really sage advice, isn't it? And, I think that's a blanket thing that we're all aiming for just real food, whole foods. And I think that's what we're really absolutely focusing on. And then, of course, we're having some of the minimally processed foods. So you're looking for the yogurts.
Yes, the yogurts are so good for you. Yes,
absolutely. And
the natural yogurts, not the flavored yogurts.
Absolutely, natural, full-fat, real yogurt. And again, that's where you just want to be aware and think, look, I'll just turn the packet over. I'll just check to make sure it doesn't have preservatives in it, that it doesn't have colours in it, and so forth. So, stick with the real, go for minimally processed. And if you are going to go for the ultra-processed foods, really occasionally, you'd be doing a double check, which is good. And it does remind me of a funny story. Back years ago when I had year ones, I had a little 7-year-old boy, and the students in my class were pretty up to speed with this. They loved being able to outsmart the manufacturer because they knew the little tricks about turning
wow,
over.
You're a good teacher.
And I remember he was talking to the canteen lady and he said, look, I know it says no hidden nasties, but that's just advertising. You have to turn it over and read the ingredients.
There you go.
And she did that, and sure enough, it had some hidden MSG in it.
Amazing.
Because, of course, we know MSG can hide by over 100 different names.
Wow.
So a packet can still say no MSG. Turn it over, it might have yeast extract or HVP or something like that in it.
It feels like as parents we have to almost fight for our children. We have to fight the system, don't we?
Yes, it would be lovely if these items, these additives weren't in the food that we're eating. And it's interesting, in the European Union, for example, colours, which are the 100 numbers, there are 6 of them that have a warning label on them. And the warning label may have an adverse effect on attention and activity in children. So that'd be nice if, I guess the first thing is if things weren't in packets, but if there were warning labels, and there aren't in Australia at this stage. So I guess it's about being informed consumers. It's not about us saying you can never have these foods, because we know sometimes we will.
Yes.
But it's making informed choices so that we know that what we're consuming, we're not being tricked. We know how to find out what's in product and we know the potential effects.
Look, every time I speak to someone that is speaking about, food or sugar or activity, it's all about the discipline of the family, and at the end of the day it comes to mindfulness of the parents and how well they look after themselves to be able to be strong enough to implement some of these sometimes difficult changes in the family lifestyle. But it's also about the community that we have around us. And I know that you always advocated for that, the community in schools and speaking to as many people as you can so that they're all on the same page and they're giving the kids the same messaging.
Oh, and doesn't it make a difference when we're all pulling in the same direction?
That's right. Yeah. Because, with the challenge that I had was that the lunchbox of my children was vastly different to the lunchbox of their peers. So then the pressure would come back to me. And that was really difficult. Sometimes you're so exhausted that you just give in to that pressure. Yep.
And that's tricky, isn't it? And I know the friend who I used to do school talks with, her little daughter at school would have these beautiful lunch boxes with homemade dip and veggies. And she talked about her daughter being teased because she didn't have food in a packet. And that's not fair, is it?
That's so interesting.
So like you say, ideally, we don't want our children to be food police because that's just annoying. But if we can have that positive, gentle peer group pressure where they're looking around and going, okay, so they're having an apple and they're having some carrot sticks and they're having some celery and some chunks of cheese and so forth. And we know that kids really they like to have what their friends are having,
Yes,
so they can
that's right.
gently encourage. Yeah.
It is all about that peer group, isn't it?
Yes, in a really positive way. And one of the things I love to do in the classroom is bring different food things for the children to try.
Yes.
So this year I brought in, again, the plain full-fat yogurt, and I've whizzed up some rolled oats, so the children got to have some of that on a plate and stir it in and eat it. And a few of them have said, oh, I'm going to be bringing this to school now. Or the green dip. Do you remember Bron's famous green dip from years ago? Bring that in to try. That's cream cheese and the chives and the garlic with veggies. So just those really positive ways of, oh, here's something nice that you could try.
Yes, that's right.
And we provide the recipes for the families.
That's fantastic.
So it's those little positive changes.
One of the most important things that we can educate people and our children about is food, nutrition, isn't it?
And I think celebrating the community of it. So I guess not really demonizing food, but celebrating the really good things about the food, the eating together, the enjoyment, the savoring. That's one of the words that we use in the classroom. You know, let's really savor our food and appreciate it and enjoy it, and appreciate the beautiful, real flavors.
Yes.
I think
it all goes back to, you know, we always talk about change of lifestyle on the individual and family level, but change of culture at the community level. But for that, really, we need to pull together to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just go back to these specifics. If we are to avoid, you know, a few things that absolutely has to be avoided, what are some of the things that you recommend that we watch for?
Well, there are about 350 additives in total that are used in Australian food, and about 50 of them are ones that can cause problems for people. So we've got the colours, which are the 100 numbers, preservatives, and they're the 200 numbers. Then we have synthetic antioxidants, and they're the ones like that were in the fries that my children were having when they were little. They're the 300 numbers. And then we move on to the MSG type ones, the flavour enhancers, and they're the 600 numbers, but also lots of other names like the HVP and the yeast extract. Wow. So there is a list of the different names for MSG on the Fed Up website. So that might be something that parents choose to explore as well. And
so what, just fedup.com.au or fedup.org?
Right.
Fedup.com.au.
fedup.com.au. It's a wealth of information on there. There's a section on there, the schools information section, that has a lot of information on the additives and simple steps that you can do. Oh gosh, I would love to hear about a school who's decided to do the 2-week additive-free trial. There are lots of resources on there to support them, but it would be amazing to, I guess, be a part of it maybe.
Even a group of friends can do that. I mean, you know, like often a group of friends in school, you know, the parents and their families are in touch, you know, they can do this as a 2-week trial, or siblings and their children can do this.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be?
Yes, and then,
awesome.
You know, if you're going around to dinner, you're not thinking, oh gosh, they're going to bring some of those crazy flavoured biscuits and I'm going to have to tell my kids don't eat them, I'm going to feel so rude. But you'll come around with a homemade dip and some veggies, and you might be throwing some lamb chops on the barbecue, and it'll be just the kind of, I guess, the plain, simple food without the packets and so forth.
Yeah, that support from the family is very, very important, and you know, it's something that often people struggle with. I mean, me as a dentist, I was always called a sugar Nazi because you know, my kids were not allowed, you know, sugar, and my focus was on that. I didn't know much about food additives, in fact.
Absolutely,
but
and you want to think that when they go to their grandparents' house, that they're not going to fill them up with red cordial and crazy snacks. So you really want the grandparents, family on board as well, so that you can go there and, you know, you've got a beautiful fresh meal, and you come back and your kids settle down well and they're happy the next day.
Okay, so we talked about the Fed Up, we talked about, was there any other websites that you wanted to talk about? The Prince Alfred Hospital's website was very useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other resources?
Well, there is. It's interesting. There's the National Healthy Canteen Strategy. So that's Australian.
Yes.
And on that is this list of additives. And it does actually need a little bit of updating because it was from a few years ago. So they haven't mentioned some of the changes with 282 and so forth. But that's definitely available. And that could be something that parents could take into schools, and perhaps they might talk to the OSH and say, look, here's a list of additives. So it doesn't say these are banned in schools or canteens or OSHs, but it says some kids could be affected. So it's a great, I guess, tool to show them. And you might say, look, I know at the moment you're using this particular brand of rice crackers, but I've noticed that it's got 635 in it or 621, the flavour enhancers. I wonder if maybe, because it can affect some children, you might consider going to a different brand. So rather than, it's not information that's come out of nowhere, it's not random, it's been researched and it's through the Royal Prince Albert Hospital, and now it's in that National Healthy Canteen Strategy. And interestingly, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, it was actually on the South Australian Department's website. And when I checked a year or so later, it had quietly slipped away. I'd love to see it back on there again, because that way it's right there, it's available, and it's a great starting point.
Wonderful. Okay, so this podcast, Grow Them Right, is our aim to have a few tips for young parents that they can implement, some practical things that they can do. Anything that pops into your mind?
I think just some really simple things. I think get the kids on board with it as well. We know they like to outsmart the manufacturers. We know they like to be little scientists. They like to cook. So tap into that. And you might even have some conversations of, well, what do you notice about the taste of things? Because we do know that if children are having things with flavour enhancers, it actually hyperstimulates their taste buds. And so things like carrots and celery and the ordinary vegetables, they just don't taste as exciting. And what I've found with the school trials, talking with the children at the coalface, is that the kids have noticed that the carrots are just tasting great. They're tasting really sweet and good. So get them really noticing what's happening with their body. And you might
mindfulness. Food meditation.
Absolutely. And you might be getting them to, you could even do some recording with them about how long it takes them to fall asleep initially, or things like that. And you could be making notes, because we think we're going to remember, but we don't. So get them as a part of it. And again, shop with them around the outside aisles. If you're growing food, that's amazing as well. But yeah, if they're involved with the cooking and the shopping, and I know with my family, we find that bulk cooking works well, and our kids who are now just scraped all into the young adult status, they do a lot of the cooking as well.
You
so
look too young for that, by the way, side note.
Thank you. And so they'll be cooking up lovely bolognese, say with leek and mince and carrot and things like that, and they'll freeze it in ice cube trays and then put it in bags in the freezer.
All the meal prep techniques a lot of young people actually are onto that anyway.
Yes, and then when they want to have a snack, they can get out some pasta which they've pre-cooked and put in the freezer, and there's the mince, and there's your ready meal.
Perfect.
So you can have takeaway, but you just need to make it yourself.
Beautiful.
And then it's
ready.
all
about making it fun, and instead of thinking that this is a chore,
yes,
thinking, no, this is that precious time that we have with the children.
What a privilege! How blessed we are to have this beautiful food. Let's prepare it together, and it tastes better. Wonderful. And not overthinking it. Just thinking, how can I provide this beautiful food with my family?
Rewarding, isn't it?
Yes.
With all our achievements as mothers, I think that when we cook a meal and our family loves it, that's the biggest achievement.
Even better.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that I'm passionate about, because I know what a difference it's made for my family and for myself. I know how much better I feel as well, that I can think more clearly, I'm calmer, I'm more settled. It's absolutely worth it. So you might think you're spending more time cooking, and you are, but it's absolutely worth it. And I just encourage families to give it a try and see what you think.
Thank you so much for this very important and very informative session, and best of luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you.